Hey, it's Kat, and I'm going to show you how to make a poly burlap sunflower wreath. So you're going to want to use poly burlap mesh, yellow, and also a green for the leaves. So you'll also need a few tools. You'll need a wood burner. This is the one I like to use, and it has a chisel point that I use because what you're having to do is you're having to melt the edges of that burlap, poly burlap. And so you're cutting it to 10 by 10 squares. And then you'll need a glass surface. Now you can use a glass cutting board. I happened to find these on sale and they were like $5, so I picked up two. But if you cut on your regular mat, you're going to burn a hole in it. So you'll probably need some needle nose pliers and some pliers to trim down your zip ties. You'll need some zip ties. You will also need a 10-inch wreath form, like this one here. That's got the three or four rings, I guess I should say. I'm sorry, my brain is not keeping up with me. You'll also need this mesh canvas because you're going to cut just the inner part and you'll attach that to your frame so that you can help hold your thing. So I'm going to show you how to make the petals next. So I like to use these little clear elastics that are used for hair. And I'm going to start with my 10 by 10. Now I have the finished edges, and I always do these the same way. So I take the finished edge from the bottom right-hand corner and go up to the left-hand corner. Then I kind of fold that down, and then I gather it in the center. And then I kind of pinch one side in and kind of accordion folding it, and then the other side. And then I kind of shape my petal, Then I'm going to wrap those tails in, and then I'm going to secure it with a rubber band. Now, you don't have to use the rubber band step. I like to do it because I like to make my petals all at one step and then kind of place them onto my wreath form when it's time to add them. But you can do this however you would like. And then you can kind of fluff those petals to the way you want them. So again, I'm going to do this again. So you got the finished edges, and I always try and go the same direction. So I'm going from the bottom right-hand corner up to the top. So I have a finished edge on the top. I turn it. I kind of start gathering it in the center. Go to the accordion, fold it on one side, then go to the other side, kind of shaping that petal. And then I'm going to just tuck those tails around and then secure it with a rubber band. Okay? And that's how I make my petals. So I do like to make all my petals first and then begin putting them on. So I'm going to speed up for this last one that I'm going to demonstrate, and then we will move on to kind of what the next steps are in making this wreath. So I'm going to use the wire frame, and like I showed you with that mesh, I'm going to draw a circle using a Sharpie just on the inside. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then you can use the outside of the wreath to cut felt to put on the back. So then I'm just going to use scissors and I'm going to cut out that circle. Pretty simple. The next thing I'll want to do is attach that mesh into the center of the wreath form. I'm just going to use zip ties to do that. And I just usually use about 4 and just attaching it to that inside ring. Once I have all the zip ties on, I will go ahead and trim those down. Now we're going to begin putting the zip ties around. And the first place I start is so that I can attach petals on each of those crossbars. So I'm just adding those zip ties to kind of mark it. They do tend to slide by doing this, but you can certainly do it either beforehand or when you're actually have the petal ready to go. Not petal. We're going to do the leaves first. So there'll be 5 leaves on these crossbars that I'll attach there. Okay, so I'm going to move out of the way. I'm going to show you how I do the leaf. So again, I start off the same way. I kind of crossing over. Then I make the petals like I do the petals, but what I try and do is make it so that it's a little bit offset. And that way it kind of gives a different effect and looks more like a leaf. Okay, so then I'm going to come over here and put this into one of those zip ties I put on and tighten it down. Now a lot of times it'll curve to the side, and we can add a second zip tie, which I'll do in a little bit. But again, it's the same way I made the petals, but I try and make it so they're slightly offset. And, sometimes it takes a little finessing to figure this out. But I just kind of make them so they're offset. So again, it just gives it a different appearance than the exact same look of the petals. So the leaves look a little different. Once I have all those leaves made, I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the frame. And so this will be, again, on each of those crossbars. So we'll put 5 leaves on. Petals and leaves, to get them very confused, as you can hear. All right, so we'll get that last one on. And like I said, you can add, because they do tend to go crooked, you can add a second zip tie just around over that crossbar to kind of tighten it down and keep it more centered, and then trim those down. So you can do that to any of them that needed. And I'm going to go back and add those in, because I do want them to kind of be a little bit more straight than kind of curved to the edge. Okay, so now we're going to move on, and now it's time to start adding the actual petals. So I start basically 1 bar up from where I put the leaves on. So again, I'm kind of going around that crossbar and adding the petal that way. Now you can add all your zip ties on ahead of time and then add the petals, or you can just do them one at a time. So I do the one on the crossbar, then I'll do 2 more before I get to the next crossbar. So there'll be basically 15 petals on this this layer, I should say. So, and I'll get this third one on. And if you're folding all your petals the same way, you'll notice that they all kind of like have the same cut edge up on top. And so I kind of layer it that way. And the uncut edge is kind of tucked under the petal in front of it. So now this one's going to go on the crossbar. And I'll do 2 more, and I'll go all the way around, okay? And I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back and show you the next level. Okay, so now I've got all 15 on that first layer. Now we're going to go in between on this next circle around. So I'm going to kind of go in between these. It's hard to kind of explain this. So I'm going there'll be basically 5 petals in the next layer. So I'm going 1 per segment. So you'll see here. So it's in between the 2 that are sitting not on the crossbar. So it's 1 petal between each crossbars. So that means there's 5. Okay, so I'm tightening these down. And again, I'm going between the crossbars and adding it in between the 2. So it's the 2 petals that are not on a crossbar that I'm putting in between. Okay, so the second layer is now complete. Now we're going to go on this innermost ring, and we're going to add petals there. Now you have to kind of go through the mesh, but you're going between the petals that you put on the last layer. So again, we're going to do 5. So they're going between, so one row up and between the last petal layer. And I'm going to do that around for the 5. Now it's for the last layer. So on this one, we're going to use strictly on the mesh canvas, and it's going to again be another 5, and it's going between those, the last layer we just put on. Okay, so again, I'm using just the mesh, and I'm putting the zip tie through the mesh in between the last 2, between the 2 petals of the previous layer. Okay, so there'll be 5. Okay, so now we have all of the flowers petals on. Now it's time to put in the center. So we need to find a way to attach this. And so the way I like to do these is they're styrofoam. So you're going to use a hot glue gun, and I use 2 pipe cleaners. Okay, I use these little U-shaped flower pins, and I kind of go at an angle. You know, you got to be careful. You don't want to go too deep because some sunflower centers are not as thick as this one is, and you can poke those through the front of the center. I saved my scraps of felt, and I just grab a square. Now I'm going to add hot glue to cover each of those 4 pins, and then I'm also going to add some more in the center, and then I'm going to just attach that square on top. And that should hold it, but I always like to be doubly sure. So I'm going in with 2 of these pins. I'm going the opposite direction from the way I put them in. So the first layer I put pointing towards the center, and these 2 I'm doing pointing outwards. And you can certainly add 4 more if you wanted to. I think that's 2 are sufficient. So now I've got my center ready to go on because I can attach it using these pipe cleaners. So we'll bring the wreath back in, and we're going to push those through that mesh canvas and pull them through to the back side. Now there are different sunflower centers out there. I seem to not be able to find the same ones twice, so every time they're a little bit different, but they all work great. And so it's just a matter of personal preference of what you like. But I'm just going to wrap those pipe cleaners around those rings just to kind of secure it on, make sure it's sitting on pretty well. Okay, now it's time for the final step, which is to add the felt backing. But before I do that, I do want to add a way to hang the reform. So I just use like a 6-inch piece of wire, and using my needle nose pliers, I'll go ahead and wrap that around one of the outer bars between two petals or 2 leaves, and just to secure that on. Then once that's on, I'll go ahead and apply that felt. And I'll use zip ties to apply them. I've had these little tweezers that are very sharp, have a very fine point, and I use that to poke a hole into the felt, and then I take my zip tie and run it around the ring, outer ring, and secure it. The felt is there to protect, and so it doesn't scratch, but you can roll that hard part of the zip tie underneath that ring, so that you only have the felt on the back side. And you can really use any color felt, whatever you have around. I just like to use the yellow or green with the sunflowers, just since that's already colors that are there. So I usually do 1 on either side of the hook, and then I do go down to the bottom and do the bottom ones, just so that I make sure that the felt is pulled tightly across the whole back side of that flower wreath. And again, This center is has a raised front to it, so I don't have to worry about crushing my petals too much. But if yours does not, you do want to be gentle doing this because you don't want to crush your petals down into your work surface. And then I'm just going to work around and add the rest of those zip ties just to make sure that felt is secure. Once you have enough zip ties on to secure that felt, there's no magic number. It's just whatever you feel is needed. You will have a completed sunflower wreath. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video and it was helpful for you in making your own sunflower wreath. Please consider subscribing to my channel so that you will see all of my videos when they're released.